And so some of the trends that we see, a lot of these, if anytime you go to a Fox conference, you're going to hear people talking about these trends. So some on the employment side, obviously, every survey you see, attracting and retaining talent is a huge challenge for family offices. Being able to adapt to COVID, what happened with COVID, and the rise of remote and hybrid work, making that shift from working everybody in the office to I may have people all over the world working on my particular office requires a fundamental shift in your technology, your approach, how you work together. The other thing that's interesting, I saw a stat the other day where I think there are more people retiring from accounting and tax fields than there are people taking the CPA exam. And so the aging of the workforce, I think this issue of finding and retaining talent is just going to get more and more acute unless you broaden your scope and broaden your horizon as to how am I going to fill these jobs. And part of that will be, where do I source my employees? Part of that will be, can I leverage my employees so that my talented people are doing what is their highest and best use, and I've automated a lot of the stuff that they used to have to do so that they can serve. I need fewer of those people to do a larger amount of work. And that gets into global workforce sourcing. So being able to not only source people, I'm sitting in Research Triangle in North Carolina, being able to source employees from globally really helps me be able to attract and retain the type of people I need to serve all of these different disciplines within the family office. On the finance side, I think the issue when you think about a family office and why is this so difficult, it's so difficult because people have all kinds of different legal entities, different accounts, and all kinds of direct investments, alternative investments, and they're investing in those investments through increasingly complex investments and structures. And so how do I get all that data in? And in addition, a lot of that data and a lot of those portfolio investments are going to be international, given the globalization of what's going on. And so some trends specific within the family office world, there's a large number of new ultra high net worth families that are being created over time. There's a large number of people who are ultra high net worth who are starting their own single and multifamily offices. And you see a pretty significant increase in complexity, especially some of the things that were started and maybe at the very uber high end of net worth are filtering down through the net worth tiers. And so you see almost all of these ultra high net worth families have partnerships, and those partnerships have increasing complexity to provide tax and other benefits. You see a lot of people creating private trust companies, which requires a different governance structure, a different set of technology challenges. A lot of people are realizing that I might have 75 or 500 different legal entities within a family. There's some huge advantage to thinking about creating a family bank or something similar that's going to require an omnibus functionality to make all that work. And what we're seeing is, in a lot of cases, you have all three of these things merged together, which creates a pretty interesting technology challenge and operational challenge. And then, as we talked on the prior page, all of that is also being done where the holdings within these entities are not just liquid assets where I get a data feed every day. And everything is getting more and more global, requiring more and more multi-currency functionality. The other analog to that is that the families themselves are globalizing. So it is very common now to see families where the family members and all their related entities may be in 3 or 4 different jurisdictions, either because they chose to do that from a tax point of view or just family members moving to live in a different location. A lot of what we see in our international operations is geopolitical risk is driving people to a pretty select group of wealth hubs, whether that's Dubai or Singapore or Hong Kong or London or the US, actually. And so there's a pretty big concentration of wealth in a relatively small number of places. Obviously, there's going to be a huge wealth transfer. There's a lot of estimates that this number is $15 trillion over the next 20 or 30 years. So as you shift from the older generation to the younger generation, that wealth transfer is going to have a huge impact, because these younger generations, if you think about it, anybody who's 30 years old, they've never lived in a world that didn't have a World Wide Web. And so firms are really thinking and accepting the fact that they have to modernize for a lot of reasons. A, cybersecurity risk. So having my own servers in my closet and thinking that that is a secure way to go, which is something I had conversations with people over the last 10 years. I think everybody understands that given the cybersecurity threats that Tim's going to talk about, having a more sophisticated approach is really no longer optional. It's really required. The next thing is, as that money shifts and the ownership and the governance of these family offices moves from the older generation to the younger generation, the expectations of what does that generation expect their office to be able to do is going to dramatically change. And I think that it's already changing, because you see the G2, G3, G8, whatever the family is, those younger family members really have a hard time understanding why they can't see their data on a near real-time basis, on a daily basis, on their smartphone. And obviously, we all know that it's very challenging to meet that demand, but I think that's where the world is headed. And the other thing is, people, when you hire people, having them be able to do the type of work that they feel like is the highest and best use of their talent is something that makes it easier or harder to find people. If you have really talented CFAs or CPAs that are spending all their time doing data reconciliation, it's going to be hard to keep those people around. And then within multifamily offices, really trying to figure out, how do I scale my operation? How can I add more clients without having to add huge amounts of cost, either in terms of additional teams or additional infrastructure? How can I scale and create operating leverage within a multifamily office? What we're also seeing, we get calls nearly every day from somebody who wants to be a multifamily office, but really doesn't have the infrastructure or the capability to provide all of the services that you need to provide to be a true multifamily offices. So there are a lot of people that have some large clients, have the ability to get other clients, but before they can actually land those clients, they need to expand their services. And figuring out how to do that on their own can be very challenging. And you're seeing more MFOs providing select services to single family offices as well. And just like in the single family office world, it's all about attracting and retaining talent. And so how do you create a work environment that is attractive and makes people want to work for you versus their other options? And the other thing is, as you see these firms develop, you're seeing more and more of these firms merging together to try to create scale to help them solve some of these challenges that are really difficult to solve when you're in a smallish organization. The other thing I mentioned is this whole idea of you're running an organization, you may be managing a huge amount of money, but you have a very small team. It's very hard in that kind of a world to think about, okay, I'm going to adopt total quality management or business process reengineering or lean principles or process outsourcing or cloud computing or machine learning or generative AI. It's just big companies have whole teams of people that are doing each one of these things and trying to figure out how am I going to apply these business best practices that I probably applied in the company that created the wealth, but I haven't thought about how do I apply this in the family office world. And this is really kind of the core of what we were trying to do in thinking about how you attack this problem for single and multifamily offices. And so one way to start thinking about that is kind of in this three rings here on the right. The light blue ring is really thinking about core infrastructure. And this by itself can be overwhelming. How do I create the infrastructure to make sure I am secure from a cybersecurity point of view, but also secure from a business continuity, disaster recovery? How do I have an infrastructure that's going to allow me to apply AI in a relatively easy manner? All of those things, it's very difficult to have the staff on site that can help you really do all of those things. However, it's a serious challenge, even for a relatively large single or multifamily office, given that the size of these are never huge. And then the second aspect of this, and what we really focused on from the very beginning, was a business process layer. So thinking about all the jobs that need to be done inside a family office, how do I create a system and a technology that's going to allow me to automate as much of this as possible and also create a governance structure that's enforced by the technology so that when I lay out, this is how I want something done as the manager of the organization, I can make sure that that process is actually being followed, because it's impossible to do the task without following the process. And so everything in a family office starts with a document. It affects multiple legal entities, both the client entities and the counterparties that you deal with. It affects assets that are owned by those client entities. And it should happen in a workflow where things like audit trails are automatically created and all the different jobs that need to be done just happen automatically. And all of that needs to be available virtually so that people can access this and participate in those activities really from anywhere where they have an internet connection. And then the other aspect of this is the data integration. It's very common for a family office to be getting data from dozens, if not hundreds, of different places. Having a way to ingest that data, analyze it, normalize it, standardize it, and bring it in a near real-time basis is a huge challenge for most family offices. And then the last piece of this is really what you typically think of in terms of technology, which is my investment performance reporting or my general ledger or my trust accounting system or my partnership accounting system or my tax system or my cash movement system. All of those things are dependent on the two inner layers. And if these things are done in point systems where each one is kind of its own island, it gets really complicated in terms of how do I integrate all of this together. What we think is that where we're heading, the back office, the middle office, and the front office are going to ultimately create, in the back office, automated processes is what we're doing. Integrated systems. I have the transaction once. I don't need to store it in 5 different systems. Near real-time data. So when I, think of 3 things. When I have a transaction at a custodian, where this is going to head in a very short period of time is that as those transactions happen, those transactions can be reflected in my system, my consolidation system that's getting data from a lot of different places. That data will ultimately be near real time. It will come in, it will flow into the investment reporting, the general ledger, the trust accounting, all of that will happen on a real near-time basis. And then for the private equity or the personal assets, things like houses, other assets, those transactions are typically initiated by the office. And so as those things are initiated, before the data even gets to the custodian for those transactions to happen, all the record keeping and the update of the data will already be in place, because if you're initiating the transaction, you know what's the impact of that capital call, for example, on my committed capital schedule, on my investment value of that underlying investment, on my general ledger, my audit trail showing who approved what before that payment was actually made. All of that can become very much near real time. And as that happens, the middle office is going to have near instantaneous access to that data. And you're also going to think about, okay, as that data comes in, how do I want to transform it into information? And if you have the data and you know what information you want, the system should be able to create the reporting and the data transformation to allow that data, instead of having to wait a month after month in to get your reports, that data is going to be available every day, and you'll know kind of where you were as of yesterday, or 5 years from now, you'll know where you were as of 20 minutes ago. And then that data, the other thing is I think you're going to see a disintermediation of the middle office, where the data's, if you automate what the middle office is doing, then that data can immediately be available to the front office and to the people who need to see that data. If you have an end-to-end process design, a fully integrated system, you use AI and you have technology supported by the expertise of how all this works and a global workforce, what we think is going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years is that you're going to see a lot of this middle, back, and front office merge over time. And a lot of, pure middle and back office work is going to go away or be dramatically automated. And so that's really what we're working on, this vision of the future, a reality. Kind of our thought 15 years ago when we started thinking about all this was, if you have a better understanding of the process, you can create a better data model, which allows you to create better technology, which ultimately allows people to have a better work environment, a more secure environment. If you have better data, you can have more timely, better information, which allows you to create a lower risk environment and have better decisions, leading to greater peace of mind. Because a lot of this stuff is so challenging and so kind of overwhelming, it really doesn't make sense for one small office to try to tackle this by themselves. And so we depend hugely on our client base to help us identify problems, think about how to solve those problems, and then work through building a process or a technology to solve those different types of problems.